For 6,000 years, there were only two kinds of people. Those who owned the land. And those who worked it. No middle. No ladder. Just an owner class, and everyone else. And here's the uncomfortable part. That wasn't a broken system. That was the system. For almost all of recorded history, extreme inequality wasn't a glitch. It was the default setting. So here's a question worth sitting with tonight. What if the middle class, the one you were born into, the one you were told was the natural reward for hard work, was never the destination? What if it was a 70-year experiment? And what if that experiment just ended? You've probably felt it already. You're working more. Earning more, even. And somehow you own less than your parents did. You don't own your car anymore, you lease it. You don't own your software, you subscribe to it. Even your home, if you're lucky enough to have one, increasingly belongs to a private equity fund that outbid you in cash. That feeling isn't random. It's not bad luck. It's history, correcting itself. Let's go back to the beginning. Picture medieval Europe. A lord owns the land. A serf works it and keeps just enough grain to survive the winter. Everything else goes up. That wasn't passivity. There was no alternative on offer. Ownership sat with a tiny few. Labor sat with everyone else. That gap was the economy. Now fast forward to the late 1800s. Factories. Coal smoke. 14-hour shifts. And for the first time, workers started organizing. Strikes shut down railroads. Riots broke out in cities across America and Europe. And in 1917, Russia showed the entire capitalist world exactly what happens when that gap gets pushed too far. A revolution. An empire toppled by the people who'd been working it. That terrified the owner class. Not because they suddenly grew a conscience. Because they realized something. If this kept spreading, they could lose everything. So they needed a buffer. A class of people with just enough to lose that they wouldn't burn the whole thing down. Here's where it gets interesting. In 1914, Henry Ford did something that shocked the entire business world. He doubled his workers' wages to $5 a day. And a few years later, his factories moved to a 5-day week. Every history textbook frames this as generosity. It wasn't. Ford ran the numbers and saw a problem. His own employees couldn't afford the cars they were building. A worker earning poverty wages with no free time is a terrible customer. So Ford paid people enough and gave them enough leisure to become buyers of the very things they made. Think about that for a second. The weekend wasn't invented so you could rest. It was invented so you'd have time to shop. Other industrialists watched Ford's profits and copied the model. And out of pure self-interest, not charity, not fairness, the American middle class was engineered into existence. Then came the moment that made it look permanent. The decades after World War II. Europe and Japan needed rebuilding. American factories ran at full capacity. Top tax rates sat above 90%. Unions had real teeth. A single income, one factory job, could buy a house, raise 3 kids, and retire with a pension. That period felt like the natural result of a fair system finally working. It wasn't. It was a once-in-history alignment of conditions that no economy had ever had before, and none has had since. We just didn't know it was temporary while we were living inside it. And then, in 1971, the alignment broke. The US cut the dollar loose from gold. Money stopped being tied to anything physical. Around the same time, computers and global shipping made it possible to build products anywhere on Earth for a fraction of the cost. Wages and productivity had moved together for decades. After 1971, they split. Workers kept producing more. Pay stopped following. The gap between what people made for their companies and what they took home quietly became the story of the next 50 years. The economy stopped being about making things. It became about owning things. Stocks, real estate, debt itself, repackaged and sold as a product. And you don't need a well-paid middle class to make an economy like that run. You just need buyers with credit. Which brings us to now. Private equity firms buy up single-family homes by the thousand, then rent them back to the people who used to be able to buy them. Software you once purchased now bills you every month, forever. None of this is a conspiracy. Nobody in a boardroom said, "Let's rebuild feudalism." It's colder than that. The buffer class was only useful when the owner class needed customers. Automation and global markets have quietly made that buffer optional. So the system is doing what systems do. It's returning to the version of itself that requires the least resistance. Ownership at the top. Rent at the bottom. And a thin, shrinking middle, standing on ground that used to feel solid. Before we get to what this actually means for you, if this kind of deep dive into how money works is useful to you, hit subscribe. Meridian Growth puts out a new one of these every week. And if you know someone who's been asking the same questions you are, send them this video. Here's the reframe worth carrying with you. The middle class was never the natural state of an economy. It was a tool, built by owners, for owners, that happened to be good for you too, for about 70 years. That doesn't mean you're powerless. It means the game you were told you were playing isn't the one that's actually running. The old rule said work hard, save, and you'll own your slice. The new rules reward something different entirely, owning assets, not just earning wages. So ask yourself honestly, are you still playing to be a good customer? Or are you starting to play to be an owner? Because that is the only version of this story that ends well for you.